So after a few years of development, lsmark's new animated pilot Catching Up has officially been released, and I've got mixed feelings on it to say the least. Since Mark has been noted to be quite critical of animated media, it set expectations fairly high for his first project. Before I get into all of that, I do want to say that I have some respect for Mark here. Attempting to pull this off regardless of the outcome, it takes a lot of time and resources to get anywhere close to this kind of polish, so do give it a watch if you can. I'm going to go through and summarize what happens and then give my thoughts as we go along. The pilot of Catching Up, with the episode named Clubbing, is about a wolf named Clay being dragged out of school to a club party by his mouse friend Rob. However, the party does not go as expected for either of them. To give credit here, the animation is amazing and consistent throughout the episode. The lighting and background work really blend everything together, and besides a few shots with some focusing errors, there's really nothing to complain about here. If the series continues on, I do hope they maintain this quality because it really sets it apart from a lot of the other indie shows that are currently premiering. Alongside the animation, the voice acting is great as well. Its cast is composed of well-established actors like Michael Kovac, Lizzie Freeman, and Zach Hadel, so there's nothing to pick at in that regard at all. But it might have been nice to see some smaller actors see the spotlight, since it's becoming a pattern that these actors are just in indie shows by default. Unfortunately, this is where I have to dial back the praise because everything outside the writing isn't really what I take issue with at all. The first major area you'll pick up on is the lack of direction. The story doesn't flow particularly well, and it just comes across like there was a lack of direction, or idea of what they wanted to happen, or who the actual target audience was. With the characters being in high school, swearing and making jokes about sex, it makes you think that it's going for a South Park kind of vibe, but it doesn't go far enough and just comes across as family friendly with a few out of place jokes. The setting of a club also confuses this aspect a bit more and adds a lot of potential avenues for the plot to follow, but doesn't really follow through with any of it. This direction problem also ties into the pacing of the show, which seems to be all over the place as well. There are various jokes and scenes that take far too long for no real payoff and could have been done in half the time with the same effect. Problems with pacing become far more noticeable as the episode progresses and as the awkward pauses and silences continue to rack up throughout. A good example of this is quite a lot of the jokes or scenes intended to be a bit funny just don't land, and when you add in a pause to the mix, it just doesn't work at all. Alongside these issues are the characters themselves. It seems like the main characters got the most generic designs, while everyone else is far more visually appealing. In terms of their personality, there's not really much to go off, as Clay is just miserable and Rob is just annoying. It's not like there had to be an introduction to the characters or world, but even without it, there's not enough substance to hold up the characters without it. Since this is the pilot, spending the extra time to introduce the cast and world to get people invested would be a much better use of the screen time. Linking in with the characters is the dialogue. The execution of the voice acting isn't the issue, but what they're actually saying. While you're watching, you don't really get the vibe that the main characters even really know each other, let alone being actual friends. This adds to the dialogue issue, making everything they say easily forgettable without the support of strong jokes and humor, leaving the episode to feel quite empty. Unfortunately, the pilot just comes off as boring, and despite watching 20 minutes, pretty much nothing happened. If you think about any of the cartoons you might have watched in your childhood, what they did in the span of 10 to 20 minutes would dwarf this by comparison. Along with everything else I've previously mentioned, the added random sound effects just don't help either. It takes you away from the scene, and they just end up being totally unnecessary and jarring. My guess is that it's just something Mark's taken from some of the shows he's previously enjoyed, but not really found an appropriate use case for them. Overall, it's a shame this didn't land as much as I'd hoped it would. There's a lot of potential here, but since this is Mark's first real project, it's understandable why there'd be some errors, especially since he's the only writer on the show. I think because Mark's known to be very harsh and critical of animated shows in general, it left a lot of high expectations for this project and leaves himself open to far more criticism. I am hopeful that everything I've previously mentioned here will be improved upon in the future. Maybe bringing on some other writers to help steer this series would be a good step in the right direction, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, that's all I wanted to discuss in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on the pilot down below in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.